everyone, and welcome back. This is Mindy here today for Lawn Fawn, and in today's video I'm going to show you how you can ink blend on dark cardstock. I'm going to start by coloring in my images. I am using these cute little mice from Superstar and Dandy Day, and I also have just a couple groupings of stars and that little shooting star at the top. I'm coloring my mice with Copic markers. I stamped this onto Lawn Fawn white cardstock with their jet black ink. And for the Copic markers, I'm using E57, E43, E42, and E41. For the bellies, I'm using E04, E11, and E00. And then for the ears and the little nose, I'm using R21. For the stars, I'm not going to be doing any shading on the stars. I'm just going to color them with Y17, so just a nice bright yellow. And on the shooting star, I'm going to trace over the little shooting star kind of marks there. I don't know what you call them, but I'm going to color over that with a Y02 just to kind of make that glow a little bit something extra from the white cardstock. Then once I have everything colored in, I'm going to use the coordinating dies, line them up over the images, hold them in place with some Post-it tape, and then I'll run these through my die cut machine and set them off on the side. I'm going to be using Lawn Fawn's Cloudy Stencil for this, and this is going to be on some blue Jay cardstock, so it's a really nice dark cardstock. And I'm also using their Yeti ink. So this is a pigment ink, which is really, really thick. And I'll need a blending brush. Now, I have blending brushes dedicated to white and black ink. So this is my white blending brush. And I dipped that or just kind of brushed on some of the pigment ink. And I'm tapping a lot of it off onto my craft sheet because pigment ink is really thick and it stays wet for a long time. So I don't want a lot of it on my brush. And then I'm just gently going over that stencil up onto the cardstock to put my clouds on the background. And you can see how that pigment ink really makes those clouds look like they're glowing. It is a gorgeous effect. You can also do something similar with Distress Oxides. Just kind of depends on the color you're using. But I really liked how the Yeti pigment ink looked on this. And since I don't have a lot of it on my brush, it's not going to take too long to dry. So I just kept turning my stencil, picking up some of that pigment ink and blending onto my cardstock. After I was done with that and I cleaned up my work surface, I'm going to bring in some of the black licorice ink. And like I said, I have a brush dedicated to just black, so I don't have to really worry about cleaning my brush off. Any brush or ink blending tool will work for this. And I'm just going around the edges of the top portion of my card with that black ink. That's just to create some contrast. And then I also did bring in some of the Blue Jay ink and I blended that in just a little bit further. After I have my ink blending done, I wanted to add some stars to the background. So I'm going to bring in some of these starry colors. And I just added a little bit of water to that, picked it up with my paintbrush and flicked that all over my background. I did use the white and a couple of the different golds. I have a lot of splatter on here, but I'm covering a good portion of it up with my words, so I could add as many splatters as I wanted. Now I'm going to take the pearlescent vellum, and I also have some pixie dust cardstock there, and I'm going to die cut that with the stitched cloud borders. So I have a few of them here. I have one cloud set out of the pearlescent vellum and two of them with the pixie dust. And those are measuring 4¼ inches, so it's going to be the entire bottom portion of my card front. My Blue Jay cardstock there is 4¼ by 5½, so it's a whole card front there. Now I'm going to use the shimmer cardstock. This is the new cardstock Lawn Fawn has. This is the white and it is so beautiful in person. Really hard to kind of pick up on camera, but it really is so shimmery. And I'm going to die cut my words using the Oliver's Stitched ABCs. And I will have to run a couple of my letters through a couple times to create my words Superstar. I also went ahead and die cut that out of the pearlescent vellum as well. That's going to be kind of my shadow for my letters. I'm going to work on a piece of scratch paper to do my gluing so that it'll catch any of the extra glue that runs off. And I'm adding some of the liquid glue to the back of the letters die cut from the shimmer cardstock, and I'm going to add that to the top of the pearlescent vellum letter. And I'm going to just kind of offset it slightly. I'll show you here in just a second. It's going to offset it just slightly enough. Now it's really hard to see here, but it looks really nice on the dark cardstock. And so it just adds some subtle shimmer to my card. And I will continue that through all of the letters, just offsetting each one. Then I'm going to go ahead and work on my sentiment. So using my Misty tool, I'm going to line up some of the sunflower cardstock, and I'm using a sentiment off of the Superstar stamp set. Line that up straight onto my cardstock. You could use an acrylic block for this, whatever stamping method you prefer. Once I pick that up at the door of my Misty, I will prep my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool. That's just going to help so my embossing powder only sticks to my embossing ink, which I'm using from Lawnfawn. This is their clear embossing ink. And I'm just pushing down slightly. I'm not rubbing the door of my Misty, which is actually what I used to do, was kind of rub my hand over the door of my Misty. I'm not doing that anymore because I'm noticing I'm putting too much pressure on the door of my Misty, and it's kind of not very good for my hinges. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. If you've seen that before with me in the past, I'm just gently giving that pressure. I'm not rubbing on that door anymore. And then after I heat set that, I'm just trimming this down into a thin strip. I'm going to add some tape runner to just the very bottom of that pearlescent vellum. Add that down to my card first, and then I can add my glitter cardstock cards down on top of that. So I'm covering up that adhesive that was showing through on the pearlescent vellum. Now this is a fun trick to get my words lined up perfectly. I'm using the grid mat surface that I'm working on, and I'm lining up my word that I want to spell out. So this first one is super. So lining each of them up using that white line on my mat. Once I'm happy with the placement of it, I'm taking some purple tape and just pressing that over it. Purple tape or Post-it tape is great because it's sticky, but not so much where it's going to ruin your paper. And that helps keep it lined up perfectly. And I'm going to do the same thing with the word star. So once I'm happy with that placement and how it is lined up, I'll pick that up with a strip of my purple tape, and it's ready for my card front. Now what also helps me is using a T-square ruler. So I have that so it's braced on the edge of my card, and I can line up my letters right on the edge of my ruler. You could use a regular ruler as well. This just helped keep it straight across my entire card front. After I added liquid glue to my letters and lined that up, I'm just carefully peeling back that purple tape and just giving those a good push down to make sure it's adhered really well to my card front. And I'm going to repeat that step for my second word. So just lining up that T-square ruler against my card edge and lining up my word star, making sure that that looks straight. I'll add that liquid glue to the back, line that back up with my ruler, and then carefully peel back that tape and pushing down really well to make sure my letters are stuck down to the card front. You could also put something heavy on top of that if you want to make sure that they're held down really well. I just kind of gave it a good push. Once all of my letters were in place, I'm going to go ahead and just line up where I want everything else to go on my card, my little mice and my stars. And I'm just going to start adding them either with liquid glue or the tape runner. I like using the liquid glue on the smaller areas. It's just easier for me to add that little dot of glue and putting some of those stars around my title there, the superstar. And what I really like about this is I had intended this to be for my child. You know, you can give this to a student, a superstar, I think would be really great. But at this time, I'm looking at it thinking, how many other people, it can be an adult in any profession that is a superstar, and you want to send that to them to just brighten their day a little bit, because we really do have a lot of superstars out there right now. And after I added a few foam squares to my mice to give them a little bit of dimension, that finishes off the card. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you will give this a try. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.